Dubai is dead, set against 0% tax for companies anymore. You've thought of the UAE as a zero tax haven, but there have been changes, even beyond the ones that we've talked about before, that many companies in Dubai and the UAE are going to have to start paying a 9% tax. Today, we're going to discuss exactly what's happening. I recently got a call from a very wealthy gentleman who lives in Dubai and says, I like it here, but there's this new 9% tax which applies to my company. And it wasn't supposed to be that way when the UAE came out a little less than 2 years ago in the wake of this global minimum tax discussion where big corporations with hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue doing business all over the world will be subject to a new minimum 15% tax. The UAE came out and said, okay, we have 0% corporate tax and 0% personal income tax. We're going to now implement a 9% corporate tax, but don't worry. And I was interviewed on the radio in Dubai at the time. Don't worry. It's going to apply only to onshore companies that are doing business locally. So the store you go to, the Starbucks, the people who work at the mall, they're going to pay the 9% tax. And if you are in one of the free zones, where you pay 0%, if you're working with the wrong people, there'll be a few restrictions, but it'll be easy enough. And I came and I said, hey, free zones should still work. Don't worry about the 9% tax. It wasn't that long ago that some rules were clarified, and I'm going to share those with you today, where more of those companies that were supposed to stay at 0% tax, that people thought would stay at 0% tax in a free zone, are now going to be subject to the 9%, just like the gentleman who called me. And here's the reality. There are places, if your fundamental goal was reducing corporate tax, there are places where you can go and pay less than 9%. There are places where you can go and use multi-part structures, and you can live in Europe and pay less than 9%. So the first question here is, number one, do you want to live in Dubai or the country itself, the UAE? If that's of interest to you, then there are some strategies you should take a look at. Should you have your company in the UAE? Should you have your company somewhere else? I quite frankly think that UAE free zone companies were largely designed to be used for people who live there. There's a number of things that are just really frustrating to do remotely, in my opinion and in my CFO's opinion. So the question is, do you want to live in Dubai? If the answer is yes, I really want to live in Dubai, not for the tax benefits, but because I just love being here, then it's worth having a conversation, but you may be better off just paying the 9%. Obviously, you're not, generally speaking, working towards citizenship the way you might in some other countries. That could be factored in for some people. If you do not want to live in the UAE and you just thought, hey, Dubai is the future, I'm hearing about it, bridge between Europe and Asia, then the question is, why would you pay 9% for a country that you're not living in? That's the decision that we made in our company. We moved a good part of our operations out of Hong Kong and into the UAE a couple years ago. And we kind of took a reading the tea leaves view. Generally, I've been right at reading the tea leaves. Obviously, we've been talking about a lot of stuff here for well over a decade, and a lot of it has come true. On this, I said, I think it'll be a number of years before the UAE rolls out some kind of tax on free zones, because my idea was, like in Hong Kong, where if you live in Hong Kong, you have a residence permit, you have some kind of ties to the jurisdiction, and you have a company incorporated there, you're going to pay tax. It's in the teens. It's reasonable. You can take deductions, but you're going to pay. If you don't have any ties to Hong Kong and you can go through an offshore profits claim, then you can theoretically pay zero in Hong Kong. Other jurisdictions like Barbados used to have a similar, structure, a multi-part, if you're here, if you're not, you're still different rates. They got bullied to get rid of that. But I thought, okay, the UAE is a strong enough country. Geopolitically, they're kind of going in different directions. And so, okay, I think they can withstand it. They'll have a 9%, onshore, and they'll keep it 0% with a few, caveats offshore. But hey, the caveats are easy enough to manage. And so with that, we put our company in the UAE. And I found it to be frustrating to manage remotely. And when these changes came, I said, got on the phone with the CFO. Talked to the business manager, talked to all of our various professionals that we work with, all the jurisdictions, and I said, if you have a finance team, or if you have someone to help, the stuff that happens in a place like Hong Kong, we've got to file an audit every year, isn't really that difficult for the much easier banking experience for the greater experience of having your company accepted for banks in other jurisdictions like UAE free zones are harder to bank around the world, so you're kind of relegated to banking in the UAE. And if you want to put $5 million in, we have, great Swiss bank that'll take you. But for decent, treasury management for smaller companies, a place outside of a UAE free zone, or really any free zone, doesn't have an easier time than any bank. So anyway, the bottom line is when the 9% tax became clear that would apply to us, I just said, it's not worth it. If I lived in Dubai and I was driving in the roads and I was sending my children to the schools, I said, and perhaps you could argue that now it's the price to pay. But, like many people who have, 0% tax companies somewhere else, I pay, at the local level. Where is it? I, as the owner of, the company, live. And so, I have plenty of strategy. For many years, I traveled around the world. No country really wanted to tax me after I'd given up my U.S. citizenships. I wasn't meeting the criteria really in any of them, so I set up a tax residence that was convenient. Now, perhaps I'll spend more time in a country and, I'll pay some tax there. But we decided to move the company out because let's go through the criteria of who has a so-called qualifying activity, which means that you will remain at zero tax. And if you do not have a qualifying activity, I'm not here to give you tax advice, but it is our assessment and the assessment of numerous tax professionals that we work with in the UAE who have evaluated this, that you are going to pay 9% starting in 2024. Now, I'm sure there's no shortage of sleazy Dubai promoters who run ads on Instagram and they mislead. Oh, there's a golden visa for $10,000 and all the different stuff they do. There is a whole culture of folks who have set up shop there and they have one thing to sell you, and that's Dubai. And, by hook or crook, they will get you to go to Dubai. That's nothing different. I mean, as we've told you for years, there are people who have one product to sell you in whatever country they're in, and that's the panacea. But here are the qualifying activities: manufacturing, processing, and distribution of goods. So if you're manufacturing stuff in the UAE, that could be fine. Again, this is not tax advice. This is just the list. Subject to interpretation. Holding of shares in securities. So you have a holdco. You want to get a brokerage account. I think not every brokerage account that comes to my mind accepts UAE free zone entities, but to the extent that some do, holding of shares in securities, easy enough. Ownership, management, and operation of ships. If you're the new Onassis, you can run that in the UAE. They'd love to have your shipping business. Reinsurance, fund management, wealth and investment management services. Interesting, to see how you could splice that for certain people who are, let's say, in the crypto industry. Reinsurance, probably not something most of us are doing, but fund management, I know some people running funds, wealth and investment management. Obviously, it's regulated, but they've been more open to that, and I think they've been pretty open. Headquarters services, treasury and financing services to related parties. Financing, leasing of aircraft, distribution of goods, in or from a designated zone, logistics services, ancillary activities. So you're seeing kind of like, if you're doing logistics, if you're manufacturing, if you're distributing stuff, if you're providing kind of treasury and financing services, if you're in financial services, or if you're in ships, then you can continue, it would appear, to operate in the free zones at that 0%. Onshore, just give me the 9%. Obviously, the other issue is if you're working with, doing business with other companies in the UAE, that could be non-qualifying, things that are not countered. Qualifying income does not include income derived from excluded activities. So transactions with natural persons except for qualifying activities, banking, insurance, finance, and leasing activities that are certified are subject to regulatory oversight. Ownership or exploitation of UAE immovable property, excluding commercial property in the free zones. If you're buying real estate in the UAE, that is changing. Ownership or exploitation of IP assets. Here's the advice that we got. We have trademarks. IP. What happens if we leave those trademarks in the UAE? If you want to play it straight, and as you know, I'm the goody two-shoes of the offshore business, we recommend playing it straight. We're not chancers around here. We don't take needless chances. We do everything right so we can sleep well at night. That's the approach we try and take. Obviously, there are some folks that try to any jurisdiction that want to be chancers, and they probably wouldn't enjoy working with us because we like to make sure you can sleep at night. But the advice that we got was that you would have to have your headquarters somewhere else. If you move the headquarters but kept the IP, the headquarters should pay an appraised rate, whatever that trademark is worth. What's the, what do you have to pay every year? And that the payments for those trademarks would be then taxed 9%. So I don't know what that would be. Could be $10,000 a year, could be $100,000 a year. I have not gone through the process of praising our trademarks, and we're adding some more trademarks in different jurisdictions as we speak. Those would all need to be compensated to the UAE entity and then taxed at 9%. So what we're seeing is if you do something that's less tangible, there's a chance that you might have to pay, maybe some tangible stuff too, pay 9%. The question is, what is your use case for having your company incorporated in the UAE? Or if you haven't done that yet, you were considering it, what's the reason why you were considering it? I'm not against paying 9%. I personally would like to pay my 9% to a place where I'm living in. So I would rather say, okay, as I'm slowing down my travel a little bit, as I'm spending not that much time in a couple of my bases, you know what? I'd rather live somewhere with a favorable tax regime. And I will pay less than 9%. I'll pay up to the country I'm actually living there. Right? I will pay some lesser amount than that. If you like living in Dubai or could be Abu Dhabi, could be Ras Al Khaimah, could be wherever you live in the UAE. And you're like, you know what? I love it here. I want to contribute. I have nothing wrong with that. It's a nice thing to do. You might also say, I don't want to contribute. And okay, I don't judge you for that either. By the way, I think what they've done is incredible there. They've gone out and gotten the best opinions from some really smart people. If you look at how the government runs, they hire actually smart people to be their ministers, unlike Western countries who hire political hacks to run things. They've done an incredible job building it. But now they're saying, we have a critical mass of people. People are going to keep coming for the lifestyle. It is an incredibly safe part of the world. People are going to come from all over the world, especially from places like Asia and Africa, because it's so close, right? And those people aren't going to necessarily go to the Cayman Islands. It's a pain to get to. Dubai is a hub. Abu Dhabi is a hub. There is a value. The question is, if your job is, hey, I make $5 million a year, do I want to pay $450,000 for that? That's a question you should ask. Maybe the UAE is one of the jurisdictions in your strategy. Maybe living there is part of what you do. Maybe it's not. But rather than just say the answer to everything is Dubai, 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 and then watch the 9% noose come down and snap your neck, it would probably be a good idea to look at all the different jurisdictions, including, as I always say, ones that you probably didn't think of as low tax. Because if you make more than 1.1 million euros per year, you would pay less tax living in Italy under their lump sum program with a proper structure. Just as an example, you didn't think Italy was low tax, but if you're going to live in Dubai and you're going to pay 9% tax, 100,000 euros in Italy, and you're working towards citizenship,